The family of a local teenager says she never would have left home without calling.
Just praying for the best. I want my daughter home, man. And if she can't come home, I just want to know where she's at.
These posters around the towns of Livermore and Jay beg anyone with information to come forward. Posters that Richard puts up every spring, never losing hope.
Tell me what happened to my daughter. Just look me in the eyes so I can see her.
An arrest in a nearly 4-decade-old cold case thanks to cutting-edge DNA technology. The arrest happening exactly 39 years to the day
when Parabon Nanolabs used that sample to create 3D models of the suspected killer's face.
It's heartbreaking. We miss her, and we're going to find her. We're going to keep looking till we do.
It's like a never-ending nightmare. It doesn't end. It keeps returning and coming back.
What if I told you on October 4th, 1987, a young woman is found murdered in the middle of the day in her own home in Westbrook, Maine?
What if it said nothing was stolen from the home, and by all appearances, she knew her attacker?
And what if I told you the apartment was locked with a deadbolt key from the outside?
What if I said police claim they believe to know who committed the crime, but will not charge their suspect?
Welcome back to Locating the Lost, Season 1, Episode 6, Who Killed Alice Hawks?
I'm Travis.
I'm Jeff, and tonight we're joined by Michael Hawks and Rosemary Driggars, brother and sister of Alice Hawks, who was found murdered in her own apartment October 4th, 1987, and by Mark Swett, who has shown enormous support to the family through this by conducting his own interviews of individuals involved in this case, as well as managing websites dedicated to the memory of Alice Hawks.
So if you guys each could introduce yourselves, starting with you, Rosemary.
My name is Rosemary, and I'm Alice Ann Hawks' oldest sister.
Yeah, my name is Michael Hawks. I'm 58 years old now, and I would be Alice's next oldest brother. She was the baby of the family, and I would be the next one. So,
and we also have Mark on here, right?
Yes, I'm Mark Swett from Westbrook. I've been researching Alice's case since 2008 and working with her family. We're all working for justice.
So I just want to thank you guys all for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you willing to talk to us about Alice's case.
Yes, very much.
So, Rosemary, can you describe Alice growing up?
I can sort of. Alice, I was finishing my freshman year of college when Alice was born. And when I was married and left the state, she was only 4 years old. But we did have time together because when I went to school, I lived at home when I went to Hudson College, and so I had those years with her. And then when I came back to Maine in 1980, Alice was 16. And she was my baby sister, and she was my friend.
Mike, what are some memories you have of Alice?
Well, I mean, our family was, as Rosemary said, she was a little bit older when she was born. Our family was kind of separated into two families. My next oldest brother is 10 years older than me, so there was a 10-year space between me and my brother, and then there's 3 years between me and my sister, Alice. So we were kind of the second family, so we kind of grew up together. You know, she was being my little sister, you know, kind of my pain, but she was my little sister. But, so, I mean, we grew up together. I mean, we had our family life was great. We lived in Bangor. We had a camp outside of Bangor, so we spent our summers at camp, you know, with boats and fishing and swimming and other friends at camp, you know, and other kids. So, I mean, our childhood life was great, you know.
What kind of person was Alice?
Alice would be the type of person I would explain to you as she would be a friend to anybody. She could be counted on for anything, you know. She'd reach out to anybody and be a friend. You'd talk to her for a while, and you know she'd be a friend.
So one thing about looking at pictures of Alice, I noticed that she has a wonderful smile. Seems like
and beautiful dimples, and she had beautiful dimples. When Alice was born, my dad and I went to the hospital to see Alice for the first time, and my mom said she has dimples, And we're like rolling our eyes, and sure she does, but she did. Precious, beautiful dimples. Yeah.
So I guess if to start talking about the case, can we go back to maybe the week before or the few days before the accident or the what happened? Describe what you guys know about the circumstances and tell the story, I guess.
Well, the story actually started the weekend before Alice's murder, because my mom was turning 67 and Alice came home for the birthday to celebrate Mom's birthday. And so she came home with her boyfriend, and he stayed at his folks lived in Hudson, Maine, about 20 minutes outside of Bangor. And Alice stayed with my mom. And so she was with us Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and because she didn't go into work until in the afternoon, she didn't leave until Monday morning. So we had, Alice was in our embrace. She was with us, and then the next Sunday, she was not.
So she was supposed to go do something with somebody on that Saturday, right? Or
on Saturday, we know that she did laundry, and because she talked to my mom that late morning for about 40 minutes.
So her boyfriend, Stephen, had locked himself out of a vehicle, right? And she had to bring him keys or something?
Yes, I'm not.
That's the story.
Yeah.
We're not totally convinced that actually happened. But.
Right, because there was two people that, some people eating at a restaurant, right, that claims that they saw some people that looked similar to that, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't confirmed that it was either of them.
I've never heard that, actually. I've never heard that.
Where did you see that, Jeff? Because I remember reading that as well.
I'm not sure. There's been a few different sites I was looking through for this, but I remember I remember seeing that some people had claimed they'd seen them or what sounded like them based on a description outside of a car, and supposedly they had been like, it was a not very memorable incident. Like there wasn't any arguing or fighting. That's what I remember reading.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are different stories. There were at the time of Alice's murder. There initially, even in the little Westbrook papers, very varying stories. But what we know and what we're sharing with you tonight is what we know to be the truth. So.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and continue on with that weekend's events that you know of.
Well, I know that you see, our father had passed away very suddenly in November of 1986. So our family was still feeling the loss of our wonderful father. And it was difficult for Alice because she wasn't in the Bangor area. So she did come home quite often, especially during that period of time, and connected and talked with my mother very often. So she did talk with my mom during the week and talk about the kitten, and they named the kitten Kamikaze because it was, crazy little kitten jumping all over the place. And then she talked with my mother that morning, late morning, because I was picking my mother up. We were going shopping, and Alice said, well, we better hang up because Rosemary will be coming after you. And she told Mom that she planned to go to the Freiburg Fair with some friends from work.
Oh, okay.
She did not mention to my mother in that conversation that she had to go take keys to her boyfriend.
Yeah, I think that probably would have come up, right?
I think so. Alice told Mom he was going golfing.
All right.
Now, do we know who Stephen went golfing with?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was that person ever interviewed by the police?
I am thinking so. Initially, I'm not so sure how many conversations he's had with the Maine State Police. I couldn't tell you that.
But his story corroborated what Stephen said happened. They went golfing.
I believe was determined that did happen.
Okay. And then
I'm not sure of the time frame, though. And you must understand, Mark, as a researcher, probably knows more of some details than Mike or I do. And here's the other thing, as a family, initially, you don't want to impede the investigation. You don't, you want the cone of silence, I guess, and respected what the Maine State Police were doing and anticipating an early arrest. So, the things that we do know were because we talked to people. So there are some things I cannot answer correctly because I don't know, and perhaps Mark can.
Mark, can you add anything to that?
Now, specifically, what would you like? What was the question to her again? Then,
so
I think I would like to set the record straight on one thing about the comment made that some people in a restaurant saw him.
Yeah.
Actually, what had happened was when I interviewed Detective Peter Murray in Westbrook, and when Stephen Bouchard had initially been asked about his day's activity, and he said that he had locked his cars in his vehicle in Portland. And so Detective Murray followed up on that, supposedly right to the street and location where that was supposed to have taken place, which happened to be like in front of his store. And he went in and spoke to the owners, and the owners said, well, we see all kinds of people out here in the street. I don't know. There was a couple out here parked. They were just talking. I don't know if that's who you're talking about. So it was a non-answer, really.
Right.
The only thing that we know is that is what Steve Bouchard has told Alice's family. That's what he's told the Maine State Police, and that was part of his timeline of that morning.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for correcting us on that.
So the friend, do we know if they were riding together, Stephen and his friend?
I'd say, Mark, could you give them a synopsis of that Saturday? I mean, you pretty much know the timelines and how everything happens. Is that something that you could do?
Well, actually, one of the difficult things for Alice's family and for anyone, even like me looking into it, is to be able to establish a timeline. And the only way that you can really establish a timeline is if you have access to all of the information, all of the questions, the responses that the boyfriend gave or anybody else who was within the area. So we don't have that. But we do have enough information to piece some things together to know that Alice, sometime Saturday morning, Alice did go to a laundromat to do some laundry and clothes. We don't know if she stayed at the laundromat and came back home and then went back in and put the clothes in a dryer, because if her boyfriend was going to call her because he had locked out of his car, they didn't have cell phones in those days, so she would have had to have been home to take that call. So we don't know exactly what time it happened, except to say that around 11:30 on October 3rd of that Saturday morning, Richard Friend, who lived in the apartment complex down in the back end of the building, saw Alice come home alone, dragging some clothes with her in the duffel bag from the laundry, and she had her hands full. So he was married at the time, and he told his wife he was going to help Alice, and he went out and helped her and brought it to the outside front porch. He didn't bring it upstairs with her, just helped her carry it to the outside front porch. They're saying that was approximately sometime between 11 and 11:30. We know that Alice spoke to her mother, and I'll let Rosemary and Mike speak more to that. But sometime, I think that the state police said that the phone conversation took place around noontime and ended probably around noontime, and maybe it went 40 minutes or so. We have Alice's phone records, but we do not have the phone records for that day. So that would be nice to know the exact time. The only other thing that we can add to it that we know for sure is that there was someone living up on the third floor of the apartment building, the same place where she was, and he worked evenings. He worked as a baker, midnight shift, and about 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon, he was laying down to go to sleep to take a nap, and he heard what he thought were kids screaming, or a child scream outside. And there were 2 young children who were playing outside, but that's all that he knew. He heard someone scream. There was some sort of disturbance. That was it. And he went to sleep, and everything changed and on the next morning when Alice's body was found. So basically that's what we know about Saturday.
There's also
Go ahead,
Pardon me?
No, go ahead, Rosemary, please. Yeah.
There was one other phone call to Alice. A former college schoolmate was getting married and had recently moved to Westbrook and had run into Alice and then called her. As she put it, she was bored, her boyfriend was not home, and so she just felt like talking on the phone, and she called Alice. And Alice had been so receptive and so happy to see her and know that she was moving to Westbrook, but in this phone conversation, she was very distracted. Alice was very distracted, and she said to Alice, "Are you babysitting?" And because she, there was noise, and she was a little offended because if it's the TV, that Alice wouldn't turn the TV down. I mean, you were talking about two 23-year-old young ladies, and then so she finally was a bit concerned, and she said, "Alice, take my number down. I want you to take my number down." And she gave Alice her number. And the police did find that piece of paper on the living room floor with the young lady's number.
Right.
So
it was a busy morning.
Yeah.
It was a busy Saturday morning.
Right.
And it was planned to continue, right? You said she was supposed to be going to the fair with some of her friends?
From work.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And here's the other thing that's never been determined. Now, you're talking to the family, and we know that the Maine State Police have investigated this and have a lot of answers, and they may know some of the things that I'm throwing out to you, but we are not sure. Alice drove a Thunderbird, and we are not sure that at what point that vehicle was in the yard, in the parking lot for some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In regards to the timeline of what we know, just as an added measure on the laundry, we don't know. We know that the laundry was done, and at the time in Westbrook there were only 2 laundries, and the local police. The local Westbrook police, in conjunction working with the Maine State Police, went to the laundry Saturday mornings for the next 2 weeks, subsequent 2 weeks, and showed Alice's picture around, asked if anyone remembered seeing her, and nobody did. So we know laundry was done. We know we don't know where. We know there are multiple phone calls spread at different times in the morning, culminating with her mother's phone conversation with her mother. So, as Rosemary said, it was a busy morning, but what we don't know is except for the phone call with Alice's mother, we don't know the exact timeline of even that first phone call with her old school friend. So, she was busy that morning.
So let's go to Stephen's story. He gets to the apartment and he's locked out, correct?
We're talking now after his golf game.
Yep.
That is my understanding. That when he went back to the apartment, and my understanding is his golf partner was with him, even though Alice's car was in the yard, in the parking lot, he couldn't get in because the deadbolt was locked and he didn't have the deadbolt key.
But he claims he tried to call her.
I never heard that.
Mark, do you know anything about that? Did he say he tried to call her to get back in?
Well, no, nothing that day. I think after the events have happened that day, he stayed with his golfing friend over his house in Portland that evening. I had interviewed a woman who was friends with them, and so this is kind of third-hand information, but that he had supposedly had made a trip or two to Westbrook when he had supposedly had tried to call and received no response, but there's no one else has verified that at all.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The question, of course, is if he was over there and her car was in the yard, he was locked out of the house, and there's no response even later in the day. Why didn't he call the landlord to get a key to go back in?
Right. Why would he just accept it that she's not going to let me in, or not even try to reach out to her and say, hey, I'm locked out, can you let me in?
Right, and he claimed that he assumed that she was just off with her friends, but why would that stop you from trying to get into the apartment that you live in?
Yes, and the other thing in our conversations with the people that Alice worked with and was going to spend some time with, she was in Westbrook and they were in Portland, so she typically would drive.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to ask as well. Were the friends supposed to show up and pick her up, or was she supposed to go to them?
And I do not know the answer to that. When Alice spoke to Mom, she just said that they were going to the fair. But one of her friends that I spoke with said typically Alice used her vehicle.
Right. When I interviewed that individual, that young lady who was supposed to go with Alice that Saturday, they did not go over to the house. She made a preliminary call first to make sure that all the plans are on and everything was still intact. So then she could come over. She didn't want to make a trip over to Westbrook if it wasn't going to happen. And when she had made some phone calls, she never got a response back. The phone rang, and but she did tell me, as far as she knew, that when they got there, they were all going to go into Alice's car, and she was going to be driving.
Oh, okay.
So, Mark, if you could continue on with the story from Stephen being locked out, what did he do after that? He went to his friend's house?
He went from what we know, from what we've been told, and what he has told people. He went to his golfing buddy's place where his wife. I don't know if he was married at the time. Rosemary
No, he was not. That was his girlfriend then.
Right, but they were a couple living together, and Steve spent the evening there.
Do we know where that is?
In Portland, I don't have the exact address. No, not. I may have it in my file someplace downstairs, but it was not far. It was enough for him to be able to get to Westbrook in a very short drive, probably less than 6 miles or less. The only other thing we know after that is he called the landlord on Sunday morning
because he could not remember the landlord's name.
Right. Yeah. He called the landlord Sunday morning to get a key because he'd been locked out. The landlord's Bob Margoloff, and he's a wonderful person. And he's helped the family in even investigating or researching this case so much. He has so much information. And so he gave Steve a key, left it out for him. Steve came over and picked it up. Come to find out that he had been given the wrong key. So Bob Margoloff went over there a little after 10:30 to bring the other key to make sure that everything was going to be okay and they could get in the apartment. And that's when they both went in there and found Alice deceased on the floor. Bob said to me during an interview, he said, he asked Steve, why didn't you call me last night or yesterday? You were locked out. And Steve said, I couldn't remember your name. Mm. And Bob said, well, how did you call me today? He said, I remembered your name this morning.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah. Seems like a odd response. So who entered the home first, do we know?
I'm sorry, you kind of broke up.
Stephen went in first? So he's the one that discovered her?
Yes.
And I know it's probably hard for you but can you guys kind of describe the scene?
I'll let Rosemary talk about it.
Describe the scene? I can't. I just know that. And again, Michael and I, and my brother, one of my other brothers, Rick, a year ahead in 1988, we just were a bit frustrated and decided that we needed to talk to some people. And Mr. Margoloff was most gracious and most helpful. And so a lot of what I'm telling you is what he told us.
Okay.
And he was shocked. He liked Alice very much. He was a landlord to two of Alice's friends. He was a very kind person, and he did pick up the phone to call 911, and Steve said, "Don't touch anything." And but he called 911. In the interim, Steve showed him where the deadbolt key was. It was on a table in the bedroom. And Mr. Margoloff also observed him going through Alice's pocketbook, and he said he had to leave. It was just such a traumatic thing, such a horrible thing to see. And he went out in the driveway to wait for the rescue unit. And then while he was waiting there, Steve came running out and went round to where the Big Apple store, yelling, "Help, help." call the police. So.
Yeah,
after they'd already called
the police. Call the police. Somebody called the police.
Pardon?
After Mr. Margoloff had already called 911 from inside the apartment.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
That's bizarre.
So, Mike, to get you back in the conversation
it was almost
here.
like a rehearsed scene to me.
Mike, just finish what you were saying.
No, and that's fine.
Mike started to...
I just, to me, that was just, it just comes across as a rehearsed scene. This is what I'm going to do when this happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had already called 911 from inside. He knew that the police were coming. Why would you run outside saying, help, help, call the police, call the police? And he had to point out to Mr. Margoloff where a key was. Why would you point out who cares where the deadbolt key is in a situation like that? That would be the farthest thing from my mind. It was just another odd thing to point out to somebody. And again, with Mr. Margoloff, and he was kind enough to meet with us and talk with us, and he was a very nice person, and he kept, and unfortunately he's passed away, but he kept a lot of records, which he shared, I think, with Mark a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But, for him, why would Steve go through Alice's purse when he just found his girlfriend dead?
Right, did he ever make mention as to what he was looking for?
An odd thing. Why would that happen?
What was he looking for?
No.
He never said, huh?
Not to me.
Right.
He never mentioned to me. No.
What was he looking for? Going through her purse? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
No, it's just
no one knows. No one knows.
Yeah.
Margoloff, Go ahead.
No, that's what he said.
Margoloff was leaving the apartment. He had just called the rescue unit, and he wanted to wait outside for them to come. And he started to leave the apartment, and he was surprised because he thought Steve was going to come with him because of the circumstances of the case. They were going to stay together. And when he looked, Steve was sitting on the couch in Alice's living room, going through her purse, and that couch where he was sitting was probably about 25 feet from where her body was laying in the bathroom.
Jeez.
So he was looking through the purse after he pointed out where the key was, right?
That's what we were told, yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I was just trying to think if he was trying to get her key out of the pocketbook or what he was trying to do, or out of her purse. That's really bizarre. So, Mike, as a...
there would be no need for the key at that point, anyway.
Right. So, as a big brother, Mike, what's your first thought when you hear something like this?
Well, unfortunately, when this first happened, I was living in Portland at the time, and my brother Jim called me from Bangor and just told me that Alice had passed. That's what that was Sunday morning. I don't even remember what time it was. But so I went over to the Westbrook Police Department, and when I arrived at the Westbrook Police Department, Stephen was there. His mother and father were there, who had come down from Hudson. So long before we got the call, they had been called and had enough time to get down there. So, we didn't get the call for, I'm saying 2 to 3 hours after the fact that she was found.
So he notified his parents to drive down from Hudson's up near Bangor, I believe, right?
Correct.
To drive all the way down to Westbrook area.
Correct. Yep.
But never thought to notify her family?
Yep.
No. And that was one, that was one of the questions that my mom had that never got answered. She always wondered why, when you called your mother, you didn't call Alice's mother.
Right.
That seems like bizarre behavior as well.
When I got to the police department, the other thing that was, they never told me that she was murdered. They never told me the cause of death. And they, quite honestly, they didn't tell us the cause of death they never really told us what happened, but there was a period of probably 2 days where they didn't even say that it was murder.
Primarily because Stephen said, why did she do it?
Right.
Why did she do it?
Right.
So he's trying to play it off as she committed suicide.
Yes.
As suicide.
Yeah, I'll just throw one thing in here real quick. I think it's important to say, it's awful easy in a case like this, as terrible and as horrible as it is, to have this kind of tunnel vision. The things that I think we're bringing up, these are all legitimate questions, and things that are very concerned, that do not look very good. And if more could have been cooperation if there had been more cooperation with the Maine State Police. Perhaps some of these things that we can't seem to put all quite together would be explained.
Right.
But as Mike said and as Rosemary said, and as Detective Peter Murray told me from Westbrook, he said that it was Steve Bouchard who ceded to the Maine State Police that Saturday that Alice had committed suicide. So that Saturday, that Sunday, when they found her, he said that she had committed suicide. When he called, my understanding was that when he called her family's home to notify them, he said that there had been an accident. So, there are some inconsistencies with some of the statements that he made. Was it suicide? Was it an accident? Who could it have been? It could have been so-and-so. One particular individual, I don't think we want to discuss too much unless Rosemary wants to bring it up. And the other one that Steve said that maybe someone was out to try to get him and they got Alice instead. So we have multiple suggestions or to the authorities from him about what could have possibly happened. But the suggestions of what could have happened are there, but the reason as to why they happened, there was nothing there.
All right.
Our first visit from the Maine State Police to my mother's home on Garland Street in Bangor had not been determined. That's not the right word, but they were inquiring about the suicide factor, and they were just asking, general questions of Alice's state of mind or mental health or what we knew, and it was just a bizarre situation. It was unthinkable that was not Alice at all. So in a very short time, I think it was like a day after their initial visit, it was ruled a homicide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can't believe that anyone would look at that scene and think that it would be a suicide.
Which was 2 days.
But he did not say that to the family.
Exactly.
He did not say that to the family. When he first came to my mother's apartment with his mother and stepfather, and we were all there, he named a co-worker, a male co-worker. My mother said, "Who could have done this horrible thing?" And he named the co-worker.
After saying that she had killed herself, he named
he never
else.
That was another question my mother had for him, that he wasn't able to be man enough to meet with her, was, why did you say to the police that Alice committed suicide and you didn't say it to her family?
Incidentally, that co-worker that Rosemary mentioned, he was interviewed by the Maine State Police. What Steve did not know at the time was that when Alice was killed, that co-worker was out of state with an absolute ironclad alibi. He was not in the state of Maine. He was not in Westbrook, Maine at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
he was a topic of conversation during the weekend that Alice was home to celebrate Mom's birthday.
And what was that conversation like?
He was, because he had called Alice late in the evening. This person had a drinking problem, and this sort of, Alice was a caregiver. She had a lot of heart, and so she went out. He wanted her to come to a restaurant. I can't remember now which one it was, and she did go out, and she told Steve that where she was going and what was going on. He said, "Did you tell your mother who you went out with?" And then he said it to me. And I knew this person. I was also at that time employed by Maine Savings Bank and the Bangor branch, and I had training sessions with this person. And I knew this person. Mike, Rick, and I visited this person when we made our trip to Portland to find out for ourselves, some things.
So Stephen probably wasn't too happy about it.
Probably not. probably not. And I mean, here's the other thing. I have a little bit of empathy for the Maine State Police or any law enforcement that's doing investigating, because when Mike, Rick, and I made our trip to Portland, December 1988, a few places we left and we're like, they're lying. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
They're lying. Yeah.
They're lying.
They're not. If they're not lying, they're not being truthful.
When you're sitting and talking to somebody and they do not look you in the face when you're asking questions about your dead sister, there's an issue.
Yeah.
And one of the person that we talked to in that trip would not look us in the face to talk to us.
So who was that? Was that Stephen, or are you talking about somebody else?
No, one of Stephen's friends.
We never. Stephen made visits to my mom periodically. That first few months, and then his mother as well would visit my mother
for a short period of time.
And then he cut off contact eventually, right?
But pretty much after a period.
Yes.
After a period of time, he just no longer had contact at all.
He made some interesting observations the times he did visit with us. He said that the laundromat that Alice went to was in a bad part of town. And because our family's here in Bangor, not that familiar with Westbrook or that area. And then he made the observation that somebody carried her or she walked to the bathroom. Because there was there was blood and obvious trauma in the living room, and then she was found in the bathroom.
Did state police ever come up with a motive? Like, was there any money missing? Anything like that?
No, there was no.
So
there was never anything related to us as far as a burglary or anything like that. No.
What we believe that we do know from what we've been told in the authorities, law enforcement authorities that I've spoken with, there was no break-in, there was nothing stolen, there was no sexual assault. That whoever was in that apartment, or whoever was let in, Alice knew that individual, felt comfortable being around that person. And something in the interim, when they were together, something happened. Something triggered this individual, and he attacked her brutally.
Here's another interesting tidbit about the apartment and about what happened when they found Alice. There was the entry door, and then there was a door that closed, so you could close the living room off. That door was closed. The living room door was closed. It seems unlikely that a stranger going in and committing a violent act would even think about closing a door like that.
Yeah.
The observation was we didn't want the kitten getting blood on everything.
Right.
So it's almost like the killer cared more about the kitten than Alice.
And the other thing that we've often spoken about also, because we're talking about keys now, because I think we all believe, or strongly believe, that there's a saying that we've had since 2008, that the key is the key. And that is that Stephen used to have little disagreements with Alice because he said she never secured the door, locked it behind her, locked it when she was in there. So they had and I got this from his stepfather when I interviewed him. It just seems funny that a person would come in, kill her, brutally kill her, not knowing her, not stealing anything, no violence at all that's seen, not breaking in, and that individual, whoever that might be, is looking through drawers or looking someplace to find a key to a deadbolt that Stephen Bouchard said that he didn't have a key to, and that he and Alice never used the deadbolt, that they would use the key. There was 2 locks on the door. So that's one of those, and there may very well be a logical explanation for it, but no one's offered anything to anyone, because the case, as Rosemary said, is still, even after all these years, much to their dismay, under a cone of silence.
Yeah, and that's so weird. It really is.
And I can't, I visited with my sister, my mom and I, my son, and my niece. We would go down. I couldn't tell you if she used the deadbolt. I don't feel like she locked the deadbolt when I was with her. And then when I heard about, that, well, she tended not to lock the door, but yet, I teased her because she had a bat right beside the door. It was her weapon. And, so it's just like, it doesn't add up that she has a bat by the door, but she doesn't lock it. So I can't attest to that.
Did they ever say anything about any defensive wounds on Alice at all? Or did they think she didn't even see it coming?
I couldn't answer that. I don't know that.
I can't answer that. Yeah.
No,
I don't know if Mark can answer that.
The only thing that I know is I interviewed someone who was there during her autopsy, and he explained some things to me. Explained one thing, well, actually two things. Most of the interviews that I've done, I've recorded with people for obvious reasons, because my memory's not that good, and I don't like taking notes. There have been occasions where I have a feeling that a certain individual that I was going to talk to about it, that if I asked if I could record it, that they would probably say no. And in very few cases like that, I haven't bothered to even ask, and I haven't recorded. So I've taken notes in longhand the best that I could. And what was that question again? Where were we going with this?
I was just wondering if they ever said anything about, was there any defensive wounds on Alice?
They never said that. The feeling that I get from the people that I've spoken to, that it was sudden. It was sudden and violent. But we don't know. And of course, the only one who knows, the only way you could tell for that would be from the autopsy records. And of course, they're all sealed because it's an unsolved homicide. And then, also, the family, Alice and Mike and her brothers, they've been through an awful lot. And maybe some of those are the kind of details that nobody really wants to know. But we know that it was bad enough. The whole array of the living room, the floor, the blood trail, and the bathroom. When I interviewed Detective Murray, he said the bathroom was awash in blood, all in the sink, all in the toilet. This was very, very terrible, brutal crime.
I can't even imagine, to have something like that happen to a family member, and the fear she must have felt. I commend you guys to come on here and talk about it. I really do appreciate it.
Our mother was 67 years old, had recently lost her husband, and had this terrible thing happen to her baby daughter. She was very strong. She was full of faith and hope and dignity, and so she set the stage for us, didn't she, Michael?
She did. She set the stage for us to adhere to, basically.
Yep.
So
she led by examples. It was a stoic
and she was
a brave person.
I actually posted a quote, Rosemary, that you had said in something I read. I posted to our page the other day. And you said, "As long as there is a Hawks on the face of the earth, we're going to search for her killer." It's a pretty powerful word. Sounds like you guys are never going to give up, and I don't blame you.
No, we aren't.
No.
And my mom was the reason. Mark, it was very strange because Mark approached us in July of 2008 about doing a website, and they also at that same time had assigned a new detective on Alice's case. So we met with the detective in September, and then after that, I had already talked with Mark, and it was my mother's decision whether there would be a website or not. And she was very happy for that, because she didn't want people to forget Alice, and she wanted Alice to have a voice.
So I had posted on our page asking if anyone had any questions about this case. So I did have one person, Michael, asked about, do we know if Alice had an answering machine?
I don't know.
I don't know if there was. I don't believe there was. I don't believe there was, because I think her friend called and said it just rang.
Yeah, from what I was told by Bob Markle, the place where Alice was attacked, which was a short matter of feet, like I said, into the bathroom where she eventually succumbed. About 12 or 15 feet in front of her was a table with a phone on it, and that was the only thing that was there, a phone.
Okay.
He didn't indicate any kind of technology like what we have today.
And like you said before, in the beginning, it's an active case, so you don't want to get involved with the state police and have them, they don't want to say too much and all that. But now it's been 33 years. Have you talked to them recently about the case and see if they're more open about it now?
Yes, I have actually. When was that, Mark? Yesterday? Was that yesterday, Mike? I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was yesterday. Rosemary had a conversation with the detective that's on the case now. She had a conversation with her yesterday. She had called Friday and left a message with the detective's supervisor that she would like to talk to somebody. And the detective called Rosemary yesterday.
Were they any more forthcoming for you, or no?
Well, I know that they're working.
No.
You know, they're
Even though it's a cold case, it's still an active case, and they elect not to share information.
Mm-hmm.
How's that? That's a good way to put it, I guess.
Yes.
And so where the difficulty comes in, what's happened to us in this 32 years is initially there are many visits with the Maine State Police. They would come to my mother's home. There were, visits from the Assistant Attorney General that was at that time handling Alice's case. We learned quite a bit about certain aspects of that day and what happened and the type of relationship and everything. So that by the end of that, and our family arrived at our thinking at different times. Everybody was processing who could have done this horrible thing to our baby sister. But by the end of the year, it had been proven to us beyond a reasonable doubt who did it to Alice. So it's difficult that and part of the reason you know that is because the information you've been given and then your own observations, your own interviews with people, so it's very difficult that the state of Maine does not try circumstantial cases.
Yeah, and I get it.
Because
they're worried about the whole double jeopardy law, not charging somebody with the same crime twice. But at some point, I think enough's enough. They just got to do it.
And quite frankly, in 2014, we met in Augusta with the Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General that has Alice's case, and the detective that has Alice's case. And we were hawk strong. It was Mike and his wife, my brother Jim and his wife, my son, myself, and we're all saying he's having a life anyway. We take our chances,
right?
But we can't determine that. Alice is property of the state of Maine now.
That's a hard way to put it.
Yeah, that's wow.
Rosemary,
but that's how you feel.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Rosemary, you had received some phone calls after Alice's death. Is that correct?
Yes. There were a number of harassing phone calls. My mom's sister received one, Alice's friend, my son, because he answered the phone. And the message was the same. And my Aunt Jerry received the first call, and it was telling, this person said, you are going to be cold. But it was this gravelly voice. You will be cold. And then when my son answered the phone, I had not gone back to work. I was still on leave, and he answered the phone, and they told him they were going to kill him.
And he's 12 years old at the time, right?
He was.
Unbelievable.
And
he was.
Like my Aunt Jerry, her name wasn't in the obituary or anything. Alice's friend that got the call, and her husband was there, and it was late at night. She got hers late at night, but her name wasn't in the obituary. And I know my brother Rick was changing locks for my mom at her place, and I never forget my mom's sister, who was staying with her at the time, and she said, "Who hates your family so much?"
Michael, if you had one thing you could say to whoever killed Alice, what would that be?
The one thing to say, I probably can't say it on this interview. Doing the right thing is not going to happen. It's been 33 years. To do the right thing would be, admit that you've killed somebody. Come forward to admit it. That's not going to happen. I mean, barring a miracle, that's not going to happen. Maybe on somebody's deathbed, But, for somebody, that's a narcissist, that's, they're not going to come forward and say they did something.
Mm-hmm.
So I promised my mom that I would not do anything. I'm adhering to that. Believe me, when this happens, a lot goes through your mind about, things aren't happening the way they should. I have a feeling if I did something, maybe something would happen, But fortunately for me, my mom told me, and I promised my mom that I was not going to do anything. So I'm not going to do anything. I find it hard to forgive somebody. People that can forgive people that murder somebody, they're a stronger person than me, because I cannot do that right now.
Yeah.
I know who killed my sister. The state police know who killed my sister. The Attorney General's office knows who killed my sister. But that person is living a life. He's lived a life for 33 years. And in his mind, I have a feeling he didn't do it. He says to himself every day, I didn't do it.
And
or she made me do it, exactly. So he gets his out from she made me do it. But
yes,
that person has led a life for 33 years unscathed.
Can I throw one quick thing in?
Yeah, please.
Rosemary said that Alice is the property of the state. That is a very terrible negative thing, isn't it? To think that's a terrible thought, but that's for her case. And this is where I want to just flip the coin to the other side. We are here. Alice's family, her friends, people who loved her, people who care about her, and I promised her mother and their family that I'd see this through the end, no matter what it is. Were her advocates, were her voice, and that's why we're not going to be silenced on it. It's just not going to happen. We can't solve a case. We're not trying to solve a case, but Alice's voice will continue to be heard, and that's why we've established a website, and particularly the Facebook page. I hope that you'll reprint the links to both of them, particularly the Facebook page, because it's more up to date. And the only other thing that I would say, the news today that we've done with Rosemary's permission and the family's permission. Years ago, we used to have a tip, an email for tips, and we stopped it because the Maine State Police was very heavy into their investigation, looking at it since 2008. Today, we reestablished that email, and we're asking anyone out there, and we believe that there may be one or two people out there who know something or who really feel that they know what happened and why. Some people are not comfortable talking to the police. We'll take your tips. Anonymously, your name will be kept private no matter what. And the email address is tips@alicehawks.com. Alice Hawks, of course, all one word together. tips@alicehawks.com.
And just for the people listening, what's that Facebook page?
Well, there are two that are out there. Who Killed Alice Hawks is the one that Rosemary and I and her family established on Facebook. Some of Alice's friends also created another one called Friends of Alice Hawks. So we kind of operating on two different levels. Those are her friends, whatever. But everything we post on the Facebook page, we make sure we cover it and post it on the other page also.
Oh, fantastic!
So and many of the same people who are members of that group are also members of Alice's group on Facebook too. And we would encourage your listeners to pass those links on to anybody. To their friends, anyone who might be interested, particularly people within the state of Maine, up in the Augusta area. If you have friends up, pass those links on, and to join our group. We're not looking for numbers. We're just looking for people to stand with us and to believe that justice is finally going to be done. And that's why we're here, and that's why we're not going to give up. We have a saying, Rosemary, right, Rosemary? We're not going away.
We're not going away.
Yep. And Alice's mother in an interview said very, very firmly to the cameraman, the truth. I want the truth. Well, in 2020, we're also going to add another little acronym in there. We want the truth. And we're going to abbreviate it WWTT. We're not going away, and we want the truth. And it's time.
Yeah. Now, I obviously have never met Alice, but I think she'd be pretty proud of you guys.
I think you're right.
So we want to thank you guys for joining us tonight, and we wish you all the best. And we'll do what we can as far as spreading the message about Alice and what happened, and hopefully get some answers with you.
Yeah. Definitely. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
And it's hard to put in, everything that happened in a 30-minute conversation.
Right.
It's just, I hopefully some of your listeners will go to the website, and Mark's done a fantastic job of writing stories about, what's happened. And I got to thank Mark, and I think the entire family thanks Mark all the time, and we don't thank him enough, but what he's done is just been fantastic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I just feel privileged to be able to do it, and you've allowed me to do it and to work with you on it, and I'm very grateful to be able to do whatever I can. So thank you so much.
All right, everyone, have a good night. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Take care.
Thanks
guys.
so much.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We would like to thank Michael, Rosemary, and Mark for taking the time out to speak with us today about this tragic event.
If you have more information about tonight's case, contact the Maine State Police at 1-800-452-4664.
Or reach out to us on our Facebook page at Locating the Lost. You can also leave us a voice message on Anchor FM. The link can also be found on our Facebook page.
Thanks for tuning in.
5-year-old Taylor Williams led investigators to Alabama this week.
So we have some breaking news from Florida. An arrest has been made in connection.
After years of agony, a glimmer of hope for the family.
Investigators spent hours searching through this house off Pennsylvania Avenue.
What could be a major development in the search for missing Alabama teenager.
Tonight, a stunning twist in the search for Taylor.
Somebody out there knows something.
They want to lay him to rest their way, not by somebody else's way.